News Talk Radio, CJAD 800.
When the 9/11 attacks occurred and the shock of what happened began to sink in, there are those who felt that there were more sinister activities at work in addition to the planes hitting the World Trade Center. Quickly, the conspiracy theorists got to work, and to this day, the internet is full of different thoughts about what might really have happened. But one man comes at this with a more educated view. As a San Francisco Bay Area architect, his knowledge of construction is at the basis of his theory, and he's on the Rethink 9/11 Canada tour, appearing at McGill University tonight at 7:30. Please welcome American Institute of Architects member, founder of Architects and Engineers for 9/11 Truth, Richard Gage, who joins me now. Good morning.
Good morning, Tommy.
Richard, tell us how you first got interested in researching what happened at the World Trade Center.
8 years ago, I was working at a local San Francisco Bay Area architecture firm, and I heard on the radio a gentleman named David Ray Griffin, who has now written 10 books on the subject of 9/11 and what might have really happened there. And he was discussing the evidence of the testimony of over 100 eyewitnesses, first responders, who were on record orally as to talking about explosions at the World Trade Center at the onset of the destruction of these towers. So this is something that the American people had not even heard of because it was being kept hidden by the city of New York. Finally, it came out. Legally, they were required to bring it out. So I was shocked. I looked at the evidence right away. I realized, oh my God, we haven't seen this evidence in mainstream media. We haven't seen it. The government hasn't given to us. It's not in the official reports. And so I'm looking forward to sharing it with Canadian people on the 17-city tour across the country.
So these 100 people were talking about it, so how could you say that it was secret?
Well, because no one else knew about it, because the city kept it under wraps until the New York Court State of Appeals forced them to give it to the New York Times, who was suing them for it. In August of 2005, we didn't even know this.
Now, could you explain some of the evidence and why you think we haven't been told the truth?
Yes, the 2,100 architects and engineers that I represent for the last 8 years now want to know why there is a 47-story skyscraper, for instance. The third worst structural failure in modern history happened in the afternoon of 9/11. And we didn't know about this. I didn't know about it until 8 years ago either. Most Americans know nothing about this building. And yet at 5:20 in the afternoon, not having been hit by an airplane, had a few small scattered fires, collateral damage, if you will, from the airplane attacks and beams flying out of the Twin Towers. It drops suddenly, symmetrically, straight down, uniformly, into its own footprint just about, and at free fall acceleration as fast as this pen hits the table. That's how fast it drops. Now, buildings don't drop symmetrically at free fall acceleration unless, in this case, all 80 columns have to be removed all at once on each of 8 given floors. So we want to know how that happened. That's the question. That's a huge question for all Americans.
Okay, what has the response been from people when you've brought up that question?
Normal office fires. That is the official response from NIST, the National Institute of Standards and Technology. NIST came out 8 years later with this official report, and they say thermal expansion caused these long-span beams to push a girder off of its seat on a column called column 79 in this building on the 12th floor. And that caused the complete interior failure of this building, and then the exterior fell down at free fall, as we saw in all the videos.
If you have any questions for my guest, Richard Gage, you can give us a call, 514-790-0800. Text your question to 514-800. Daniel sent us a text. He wants to know how many people were in on this conspiracy.
Well, I'm an architect. The 2,100 architects and engineers want to know the same thing. There's a lot of questions that a real investigation that looks at all the evidence, that brings forth witnesses, and offering immunity to get them forth and to take their testimony under oath. That's the kind of investigation that will begin to lead as to who may have been responsible for this and how many there were, how they got access to these towers, which we can talk about. What we really need to know right now is why is there the evidence of thermite incendiaries on the ends of the steel beams in World Trade Center 7 that's actually quite well documented in FEMA's Appendix C of their 2002 May report.
Now, what did you think when the day it happened? What were you said that you started getting into this much years later. What did you initially think happened when you first heard about it?
Well, of course, I only saw the Twin Towers go down this morning, like most Americans and Canadians and people around the world. I was in shock, like everybody else. We were under attack. We didn't know when the next attack or plane, what was really happening. So people are dying in these buildings. 3,000 people, including 24 Canadians. So pretty soon, right away, we're told the official story that these came down with the jet plane impacts, damage, and ensuing fires causing a gravitational collapse. And we're told it's an apple, but when you really look at the video testimony, what you see is an orange. In other words, we're told the building section above the point of jet plane impacts drove the rest of the building straight down to the ground. Well, we want to know why. If that's true, the videos don't show that. We want to know why that upper section is destroyed completely in the first 4 seconds, almost in the exact same manner as World Trade Center Building 7, which we just talked about. After that, something very interesting is going on. We have the lateral distribution of free-flying structural steel components weighing up to 4 tons in every direction, landing up to 200 meters away. This is extraordinary. What's the lateral force? It seems very explosive, and there are explosives going off 20, 40, 60 stories down below the zone of destruction. And then we see also no stack of 110 floors at the base of these towers. We see like not even 50. In fact, we don't see one. These are an acre in size each. 90,000 tons of concrete in these floors is missing largely at the bottom of the towers. If you look at the video, what you see is a massive pulverization of 90,000 tons of concrete in mid-air, and it's spread river to river across lower Manhattan. And what do scientists find in that dust? Actually documented by the U.S. Geological Survey themselves, billions and billions of small, previously molten iron microspheres. This is the evidence of thermite. Thermite is an incendiary used by the military to cut through steel like a hot knife through butter.
Daniel on the line with a question. Good morning.
Yes, hello?
Yes, Daniel, go ahead.
Yes, well, I'm an American, and I actually was very against Richard Gere at first because what he did was totally un-American. When I realized I was looking into the evidence, what he was presenting, I could not discredit what he is saying. The evidence stands. There is no way that this was brought down by any other means by a fire. That would be like having your oven on all day and suddenly it would collapse on the kitchen floor. It's impossible. Look at the evidence. Try to contradict them, and you can't.
All right, thanks for the call. This text says just the opposite of what this caller says. He says, when are we going to stop giving these guys airtime? I can understand uneducated, illiterate people buying into these theories, but these guys are educated. What's their excuse? The West must look like a place populated by cognitively challenged people to the rest of the world.
This is what happens when people form opinions without first looking at the evidence. The first caller, or the previous caller, said that once he looked at the evidence, he had to change his mind. And that's what happens. This is rational, forensic, scientific evidence. It turns out to be quite irrefutable. I mean, we've spoken to over 300 audiences now in 30 foreign countries and 82 American cities. And by a show of hands, which we do every time and which we'll be doing tonight in Montreal at McGill University, we ask how many believe the official story, how many unsure, how many already agree with the evidence for controlled demolition. At the end of the presentation, usually no one believes the official story anymore. Usually there's only 1, 2, 3, 4 out of 100 or 200 that are unsure. 90 95 to 100% of people end up agreeing with us. So let's get informed and then make our opinions.
Well, that could mean that you have a very convincing presentation. It doesn't mean it's necessarily true.
Okay, well, we can discuss that.
Well, all right.
But
Now,
it turns out that most very highly educated people who are trained in critical thinking do in fact
but there are
have to agree.
but there are highly educated people who also disagree with your theory.
There are a few here and there, actually, and in fact, the only engineers and architects who are vocal about their disagreement are those that are actually involved with the official story in some way. Like they work for NIST, or they have some other agenda that's rather obvious.
Okay, this one says, could it not be possible that the obviously well-organized terrorists engineered these collapses to coincide with the planes crashing into the building, knowing that the plane itself might not be enough to collapse the towers and surrounding structures?
Well, the question is, would the perpetrators of the placement of these controlled demolitions trust the hijackers who failed Cessna flying school to bring a 757 into the Twin Towers at 500 or 500 miles an hour? Most pilots say they couldn't even accomplish that. So researchers, we haven't looked into this ourselves, we're architects and engineers, but researchers suggest that, in fact, these planes were probably remotely guided, which was a technology that was commonplace at the time.
This is a very basic text question. It says, okay, who did this and why?
Well, yeah, we'd like to know the same thing, actually. What we have on our website at rethink911.ca is the evidence for the explosive demolition of World Trade Center 7 and the Twin Towers. Once we look at the evidence, we obviously have a question: who had access, who had the means, who had the motive, who had the opportunity to engage in this crime? We're looking for criminal investigators who are trained in following these leads and following the money, which is a classic method of inquiry here. Journalists should be asking these questions all around the world, and many are. And what happens is they get put down by their bosses somehow.
Well, there's a lot of questions coming in, and our boss will let us take all of those calls, and we're going to take a lot of text questions as well. Your chance to speak to Richard Gage, who is founder of Architects and Engineers for 9/11 Truth. Join the conversation. Text your question to 514-800. I'll get to all of the calls and the text. That's coming up next. This text is saying, kind of odd that Rudy Giuliani, mayor of New York, was never called upon to testify at the 9/11 Commission.
Yeah, I don't know about his testimony at the 9/11 Commission. I do know that his testimony, he did predict, or was told, he said he was told that the towers were going to come down. No high-rise has ever fallen due to fires, and yet on 9/11 we have 3. So I don't know how he could have predicted that they were coming down.
This text is saying
foreknowledge.
Building 7 was taken down by fire. How stupid do they think we are?
Well, this is indeed the official story. They say normal office fires expanded beams in a complete interior collapse of World Trade Center 7, which couldn't possibly have happened according to the official story, because we would have seen the massive deformation of the perimeter steel structure in Building 7 with massive window breakage. And yet what we see in the videos clearly is a building that's dropping like a rock into its own footprint and at free fall acceleration from top to bottom in under 7 seconds.
Okay, let's go back to the phones. We've got Michael on the line with a question. Michael.
Hi, good morning. First of all, shame on you. Second of all, if you have hundreds of witnesses that heard the explosions, where's the audio? Where is the audio?
Oh, there's plenty of audio that supports and documents the explosions. There's hundreds and hundreds of witnesses that heard the explosions and are on written and oral testimony. And regarding shame, before we assign shame, blame, and labels like conspiracy theorist, what we need to do is actually look at the evidence. It's more explicitly laid out on our website, our main website, which is ae911truth.org.
Next question, we have Jacob on the line with a question. Good morning.
Hi there. I just wanted to know if your guest has seen the movie Loose Change.
Indeed. It's a great movie. Millions of Americans and Canadians have seen Loose Change, and it is the first step on the way to an enlightening discovery of the evidence and the implications of this incredible evidence.
Yes.
Okay, thanks. Jason on the line with another question. Go ahead.
Yes, hi, morning. Just a quick question. The basic construction materials or the basic demolition materials that are used to bring down a building and control demolition, I understand that there's a thermite put around, let's say, the larger steel beams. This creates a pool of, we'll call it magma, underneath the building. And when they were doing the excavation after that happened, they actually found these massive pools of heated up metal that could only be brought on by a controlled demolition.
Indeed. What's found in the basement of the Twin Towers by first responders and structural engineers, in fact, the structural engineer of the World Trade Center himself, Leslie Robertson, are pools of molten iron, as it turns out to be. It's also molten iron is pouring out of the South Tower just 10 minutes prior to its collapse. This is extraordinary. It takes 1,400 degrees Celsius temperatures to begin to melt iron.
All right, thank you very much. We're going to continue the discussion. If you have any questions or comments, join the discussion. Richard Gage, my guest, founder of Architects and Engineers for 9/11 Truth, for 9/11 Truth, for what he thinks happened on that day. Unusual text we're getting in. This one says, Tommy, it's funny how the people texting, calling to deny what Mr. Gage is saying have nothing but insults to throw. Shame, do you think we're stupid, etc. It's terrible that the art of argument has been lost. That's from Eric. Another texter wants to know what you think of Dr. Judy Wood's theory of who pulled the towers down.
There are several other theories, alternative to the mainstream theory of jet plane impacts and fires. Judy Wood suggests that directed energy weapons brought the buildings down. What we have solid scientific forensic evidence for is thermite and nanothermite. We didn't get into nanothermite yet, by the way. There is found in 4 independently collected samples by a team of scientists, small red-gray chips, about 1 millimeter or so in length. These are the evidence of a very sophisticated form of thermite where aluminum powder and iron oxide crystals are found in extremely small particles, 1,000 times smaller than the human hair. These are set in an organic bed of oxygen, silica, and carbon. They are made only in the most advanced defense contracting laboratories. So this has to be dealt with as well. And in fact, this is one of the pieces of evidence, including evidence of explosives or eyewitness testimony, and evidence of very, very hot molten iron temperatures that Dr. Judy Wood denies. So I can't accept a theory that has no evidence, and when she's also denying the theory or the evidence that we have.
This text is saying, completely fascinated. I've been skeptical of 9/11 reports way before any conspiracy theories arose. Way too many unanswered or poorly answered questions that have far more logical answers. Keep digging. I'm looking forward to the truth. Another texter wants to know where you were on 9/11.
I was in my apartment, and I was watching TV like others, and I was in shock seeing these towers coming down, just basically buying the official story for 4 years. I mean, not even knowing there was a third skyscraper that was destroyed on 9/11, where we have 3 skyscrapers for the first time in history destroyed, but essentially due to fire. A lot of people think the jet plane impacts had a lot to do with this. They really didn't. Even the jet fuel, NIST says, burned up in the first, mostly outside the building, and then the rest of it within the first 10 minutes. We're talking about normal office fires, essentially, for all 3 skyscrapers.
Bob on the line with a question. Good morning.
Yeah, so he's asking us to believe that all those elevator mechanics revamping elevators with members of Al-Qaeda, and George Bush was on the phone regularly to bin Laden.
Let's take them one at a time.
9/11.
One at a time.
In the plane on 9/11. That's when we're ready with the bombs.
I didn't say that Al-Qaeda got into this building. I think that is rather ludicrous. Also, I agree with you. We have to look at who had access to this building, who was controlling access to this building. Well, I don't think we're talking about Al-Qaeda here. I'm no friend of Osama bin Laden, but I'm guessing that they couldn't have gotten access to 3 of the most highly secure buildings outside the Pentagon.
This was Tommy. Ask him if he knows who holds the patents on the nanothermite back on 9/11. Who held the patents?
There are patented cutter charts charges that release molten iron in milliseconds, cutting through structural steel. And they are owned, and that is available on Google. And I don't remember the name of the patent owner, but it was prior to 9/11, in the late 90s, actually. So that needs to be looked at. Now, why would they have used thermite? It's not normally used. In fact, except for one occasion, like 40 years ago, regular thermite. Normal high-energy explosives like C4 and RDX would produce very loud bangs, very bright flashes. So apparently they chose technology that was a lot more expensive, but had a lower signature.
This one says, how many people had to be involved in this cover-up? How is it possible they all kept silent?
Well, we would like to know how the silence has been kept. There have been many whistleblowers, by the way, that we do know about from the FBI, from the CIA, from journalists who aren't able to get this story through mainstream editors and so forth. We do need a real investigation that offers immunity, that protects witnesses to bring them forward.
This texter wants to know if the U.S. government is capable of this. Do you think they could be involved in covering up the truth about Roswell and UFOs?
I haven't done any research on Roswell and UFOs, but I think there's a lot of evidence for a lot of cover-ups throughout history. Look at Iran-Contra. Look at the Northwoods effort, which was an effort brought to the attention of President Kennedy by his Joint Chiefs of Staff to attack our own plane, blame it on Cuba, and invade them. And this was turned down by Kennedy.
Okay, this one says, is it not possible that they needed to have a self-demolition, a set of explosions, so it comes down on itself to save thousands of other people? Who would want to admit sacrificing your own citizens for the betterment of others to live? Let it go, says this texter.
Let it go. Let go the crime of the century. Let go mass murder. Let go of the event that catalyzed new cultural, horrific cultural, economic, and military changes. We have an ensuing global war on terror costing $4.5 trillion to the Americans and a lot to Canadians as well as the loss of our civil liberties.
We're going to continue more questions. We have a few more minutes with our guest speaking at McGill University tonight, Richard Gage, founder of Architects and Engineers for 9/11 Truth. Text your question to 514-800.